Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Gradius, Konami's 1985 genre-defining classic. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. Today we'll be looking at the NES Classic version of Gradius, which is basically just the 1986 NES and Famicom port. So we have the ability to play the game in one of two ways, one player and two player. Unfortunately, it's not simultaneous co-op, you're just swapping off when one player dies. Not the greatest way to go and play one of these games. Selecting one player, we're dropped into a base of a horizontal scrolling shoot 'em up in what is basically like a pre-stage. So, as is typical with the Gradius games, you have this pre-stage where you're fighting these waves of enemies, and if you destroy certain waves of enemies, they'll drop these power capsules, or orange enemies as well. Those lay the basis for what is one of the greatest innovations, I feel, in shoot 'em ups. The power-up bar. So these power capsules move an indicator on the bottom bar that we can see there that has all these power-ups listed. The first one being speed, then missile, double, laser, which we've currently obtained, and options. Then there's, at the last one, we also have a question mark, which happens to be a force-filled barrier, which is very desirable in this kind of game. So each of those power-ups is extremely useful, but some of them could be more situational or problematic if you're not careful with them. The speed you can upgrade multiple times, which you want to be careful with. If you get your speed too fast, then you run the risk of crashing into enemies or terrain. But you don't want to be too slow, otherwise we can't avoid the enemies and the bullets that come flying our way. So the other weapon, aside from the laser, is the double. That one, we get a double shot that fires at a 45-degree angle up from our ship. Useful for some situations, but overall it's not what we want. So we're most of the way through the first stage of the game. We're just to this volcano mini-boss, sub-boss? I'm not quite sure what you'd want to go and call it. We just want to find ourselves a nice safe-ish spot. With the option that we have, as well as the laser and the missiles, we should be able to get past without much problem. And then we come across a staple of the Gradius franchise, the Big Core, which until the end of the game is basically the only boss that we'll encounter in the original Gradius. So to destroy a big core, you have to take out several barriers guarding the core itself. And once you get through all those barriers, then you can deal damage to the core itself, and the fight ends relatively quickly. But you have to be careful. If you don't destroy the enemy and the boss in time, then it will basically time out and self-destruct. An interesting feature that still allows you to progress even if you're having difficulties with certain of the bosses in the game. So there's advantages and disadvantages to that feature. So this is definitely a true genre-defining game, I feel. It's, in my mind, when I think of horizontal scrolling shoot 'em ups, I think of Gradius. And really, in a lot of ways, it defines so much of what we go and see in there. The enemy patterns are so classic and just, like, well thought out. It has some really interesting stages when you're, and like great detail if you, depending on which versions you're playing. Unfortunately, graphically wise, the NES version is very, very inferior to many of the other ports that you could potentially be playing of Gradius, and well, it doesn't even hold a candle to the original arcade version as well. But it is the most prolific version, the one that most people will find themselves familiar with. Another thing that the Gradius series gave us, it was the first instance of a game using the Konami code. Up, up, down, down, left, right, BA. And then start. If you enter that code in when we are at the Well, when you pause the game, then if you don't happen to have any power-ups, it will give you 1 speed, missile, both options, and the force field. That code would go on to be used in so many games, but Gradius was the first. So this section's interesting. We have all these enemies popping in and flying at us. I had the hardest time with this when I was young, having to use slow motion to be able to get past it. Really, the game itself isn't very easy. Gradius has a rather significant problem in that the game itself is relatively difficult, and it has a scaling system for the power-ups. The stronger you are, the more the enemies rank up, so the more difficult they'll be. They'll fire more bullets, and the bullets will travel at you faster. But if you die, you happen to be set back to checkpoints, which is a system I always dislike. And you will be completely reverted back to your base power, which in some of the later stages is basically a death sentence, as there's not a whole lot that you can really do at that point. So here we are on stage 3, we get to see our buddies, the Moai heads. This stage is one of the easiest ones to see the rank up changes from when you go into it with no power versus full power, as the number of rings that the Moais fire at you is like really extreme. So real quick, we'll take a moment to use the Konami code. If you had any power-ups, or rather power capsules in reserve in your power-up bar, you will at least retain one of those, so you'll be able to speed up initially right off the bat. But that's really a small consolation. So, there are some interesting bits of history as well. So, of course, this is the first instance of us piloting Konami's iconic Vic Viper space fighter. But in the English manual, it wasn't actually known as the Vic Viper. It was actually the Warp Rattler, a really strange renaming of a ship. Fortunately, that would be rectified in later Gradius games, but it's an interesting bit of history to note that the Vic Viper wasn't always the Vic Viper, at least not in the US. So, that's about all we have for Gradius, served up for your enjoyment. It's definitely one that helps define the horizontal scrolling genre, for me especially. And especially with the iconic power-up bar that's been used in tons of different, well, Konami games, as well as titles from other developers as well. This one sets the bar for the future of shoot-'em-ups. Unfortunately, we never did go and get anything past Gradius 5, even though there was a Gradius 6 in development. And I do believe I've covered most of the titles in the series. Those that I haven't, I'll definitely get around to at some point. Minus flavors? So, one big minus flavor I have is the power-up syndrome. So we can get ourselves super powerful, but if you die, then you're basically reset and left in a really vulnerable position. I definitely don't like that at all. Plus flavor-wise, though, the game itself has a great soundtrack, especially like for the time it came out. I still think it sounds great to this day, though the sound effects not as much. We also have the power-up bar. Like I mentioned, one of the greatest innovations in shoot-'em-ups. And it's this awesome standpoint, or beginning point, for the shoot-'em-up genre to give us like this title, which would go and yield so many other Gradius titles, Salamander, the Parodius series, and like the Automedius series. So much started here, really, from like Konami's first horizontal scrolling shoot-'em-up, Scramble, but this is the true starting point of all of that. And we also get the Konami code. So, really, Gradius is one of those titles that maybe it hasn't aged as well as some other shoot-'em-ups have, but considering its place in history, I definitely think it's at least worth your time to go and play it at some point. Well, that about wraps up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.